The epistle reading is from James chapter 3, beginning with the first verse. If we put bits into the mouths of horses that they may obey us, we guide their whole bodies. Look at the ships also. Though they are so great and are driven by strong winds, they are guided by a very small rudder, wherever the will of the pilot directs. So the tongue is a little member and boasts of great things. How great a forest is set ablaze by a small fire. And the tongue is a fire. For every kind of beast and bird, of reptile and sea creature can be tamed and has been tamed by humankind. But no human being can tame the tongue, a restless evil, full of deadly poison. With it we bless the Lord and Father, and with it we curse men who are made in the likeness of God. From the same mouth come blessing and cursing. My brethren, this ought not be so. Does a spring pour forth from the same opening fresh water and brackish? Can a fig tree, my brethren, yield olives or grapevine figs? No more can salt water yield fresh. This is the word of God for the people of God.
So, the day my son Noah stopped taking piano lessons, I thought it was important for my children to take piano. It would give them a good foundation in music. They could join the club of civilized people. I don't know what I thought. And my girls didn't seem to mind it too much, but my son Noah, he just never took to piano, and he would complain, and he would whine. And one day I'd taken him to the piano teacher's house, and he wouldn't get out of the car. And I'm like, yeah, go on in, it won't be so bad. He's like, no, I don't want to go, I won't want to. And I'm like, come, just go on in for the lesson. He said, I want to quit piano. At that moment, this is amazing, my father, who was 2.5 hours away, reached across that distance and possessed my body. And I heard my father say through my mouth to my son, Howells aren't quitters. And Noah looked at me kind of funny and said, what was that? And I said, oh, you can quit piano, let's go home. Our speech, where does it come from? What impact does it have? Our words. James, the brother of Jesus, he's concerned about our words. It's part of, it's got to be what it means to be created in the image of God. Like, you wonder, what is that? I think it's speech, right? We're the one creatures that we have speech. We're the ones that are created in God's image. Other creatures, they might be wonderful, but they don't have speech. Our dog Duffy, a corgi, was a wonderful dog. I think he understood some words. I think he knew about 12 words. He knew eat and walk and Duffy. But he never spoke a word to us all those years. Animals, they do speak, on TV and cartoons and such, Foghorn, Leghorn. I say, boy, it's a joke, son. In cartoon, Pepe Le Pew, French accent, flirting. Speaking cartoons, but in real life, we're the ones with the gift of speech. And the power of it is absolutely amazing. And you should remind yourself at the beginning of each day of the power of your words, and it would change how you talk all day long. So the power of saying, I love you, or the power of saying, I never really loved you. The power of saying, I'm proud of you, or the power of saying, what's wrong with you? The power of saying, I'm sorry, it's malignant. And the power of saying, it's benign, it's treatable. The power of words, James says they can bless, they can curse. We shouldn't have both coming out of the same mouth. God wants us to use our words to bless. A lot of times at weddings, I'll quote this thing from Jean Vanier, Catholic theologian. I've used it in sermons here. Vanier says that to love someone isn't to do things for them. I think I thought that for years. Like, my wife, my children, I love them, I will do things for them. They'll be loved. Vanier says, sometimes when you do that, you can crush the other person and say, like, you maybe can't do this for yourself. He says that what love is when you use your words and you say to someone, you're beautiful. I trust you. You can trust yourself. There's light shining in you. And hard words, we forget about this. Sometimes there's a hard word. It's like, what's that game with the little wooden blocks? Jenga, I think, and you're stacking up the little wooden blocks, then you make kind of one little mistake, and whoa, the whole thing comes tumbling down. That's how it goes with negative words, right? I know as a preacher, those of us who do this, I can preach a sermon, 19 people can walk out the door and say, wow, that was a great sermon, and one person says, you are a doofus, I can't believe you said such a thing in the pulpit. I'll dwell on that one all week long and forget about the 19. What happens in our society is that actually gets reversed, is that 19 out of 20 words are not good words. I don't mean they're dirty words or cuss words, they're just words that are used to demean, they're words of political rancor, they're words that are just plain false. They're words that are, what's the word, weaponized. Sometimes I'm doing premarital counseling and I'll ask the couple, what do you think's the key to a successful marriage? They get it wrong every time. They'll say things like, hey, we enjoy working out together. Oh, that's no good. And they'll say, they almost always say communication. And communication is a great thing to work on in a marriage, but actually you can communicate well and have a terrible marriage, because then you're communicating, you can say, you get on my nerves, you are annoying to me, I can't believe I married somebody like you. You're communicating very effectively, but it's so hurtful, it tears down. Right? God gave us words so that we might build up. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, one of the great Christians and theologians of the last century, he was arrested because he was part of a plot to do in Adolf Hitler. He'd formed a community of resistance Christians in Germany who said, we're Christians, we can't be part of this Nazi thing. We can't say Heil Führer. We can't do that. And he got arrested. When he was forming this community, he developed some rules for how you live together as Christians. And one is a pretty good rule. Bonhoeffer said, never talk about somebody who's not in the room. That actually would make the world a whole lot better if we never talked about people who are not in the room. I have an improvement on Dietrich Bonhoeffer's rule. And it goes like this. Never talk about somebody who's not in the room unless you're praising them. And then it's actually okay. Reverend Nathan Arledge, our missions guy, he's not in the room. And I can say to you, Nathan is wonderful, and he's the great encourager on our staff. See, I can do that if he's not in the room. Talk, speech, the image of God. How do we talk about God? How do we talk about the church? You made a statement, by the way, when you got up and came to church today. This is like a free cut day. But you got up and you came. And that's a word to people that live around you. It's a word to yourself. It's a word to people that know you about church. How do we talk about God? How do we talk to God? It's interesting. We tend to think we have words and we use them, and we might use them to talk to God one day. We might pray. But what about this? What if God gave us words so that, first of all, we might talk with God, and then, by extension, you could talk to other people. Like the main reason God gave you words is so that you could talk with God. And then if we talk with God, how do we talk about God and situations? And we miss this a lot. I think we miss it a lot of time. I notice it, when there's something like a hurricane. So the other day, I came to the church, and I was leading something down the hall. And when I came in, somebody said, would you pray for the safety of people in the hurricane? And the timing of this request was incredible, because on my way walking down the hall to that, I'd gotten a text from my son. Now, my son, he can send some pretty snarky, smart-alecky texts. I think it's because he quit taking piano. I don't know. And so he sent me one, and I just had read it right before I walked in the room. And what he had sent me was this link. I don't know if you saw this the other day. Pat Robertson, Pat Robertson, like the TV evangelist guy, that he had said that he was casting a spell of prayer protection over God's people. And this is the same guy. This just gets on my nerves. This is the same guy who, during Hurricane Katrina, had said that hurricane was God's judgment on homosexuals in New Orleans. He's got a really bad theology of the weather. And what we're tempted to do sometime, and don't do this today, if your house survives the storm, don't say, oh, God protected me because I prayed and God helped. Don't do that. We do this, and it's well-meaning, but a few years ago, it rained like this just endlessly for several days, and there was a tree next to the building, if you remember this, and the tree fell. But it didn't fall on the building, it fell next to the building. And people were saying to me, oh, God is so good. God made the tree fall next to the building instead of on the building. I'm a cynic. And I said, like, God might have just kept the tree up. I don't know. Here's the deal, is we tend to think, okay, God answers prayer and helps us, and maybe not the other people. Never say that. Here's what happened to me yesterday. I got a message in the morning from a pastor in Chapel Hill, Justin Coleman, a great friend, and then I had another message from another pastor, and then I heard from Bishop Hope Morgan Ward, who's the bishop in Raleigh, and then my own bishop, Paul Leland, here, and they said there's a minister, I didn't know him, Methodist pastor named Billy Olson. He's the pastor of St. Luke's United Methodist in Laurinburg. And they said he's at the Levine Children's Hospital with his son, Jaden. Would you go see them? So what happened, as it turned out, is that Jaden, who's 17, was with his father, Billy. They're down in Laurinburg, down east, and they were driving. And there was debris in the road. And they thought, oh, that's dangerous for somebody. So doing a good thing. They stopped, and they were getting the debris out of the road, and while they were doing that, a big branch fell on both of their heads. Now, Billy, the pastor, he's got a big bandage on his head, but he's okay, but his son Jaden is not. He had a very serious skull fracture. He's at Levine Children's Hospital fighting for his life. And while I've been sitting with them, they're telling me about Jaden. He's like a great student, a great athlete, spends his summers going on mission trips, he's in Bible study groups. You can't have a better kid. You see, and that's the thing, is God doesn't say, oh, there's a holy one, I'll keep the branch from falling on him, but I'm going to afflict these guys. Did God afflict Billy and his son Jaden? I don't think so. Branches just fall because it's wet and windy. How to use our words. Here's something in closing. What we don't recognize enough, I think, is that the words that come out of our mouth, they come out of our mouth because of what we've chosen to let come into our mouth. What was that old thing when I was a child? You had the three monkeys, see no evil, hear no evil, so whatever. The hear no evil, that's a hard one because there's so much around us all the time. What do you take in? I think when I said to my son, Howells aren't quitters, I think I'd heard that probably 178 times from this is probably, by the way, while we're having church right now. Howells aren't quitters, can't cancel church. It's good to be here, admit it. But those are words that come in. So what are the words that come in? How do you hear? And then what? So I just finished the other day Tara Westover's wonderful book, Educated, which I would commend to anyone. So it's a true story about a young woman. She grew up in Idaho, and her family, they were Mormon, but they were radical Mormons. They were like extremist Mormons, and they lived off the grid. She didn't have a birth certificate. She never went to public school. She never went to the doctor. I mean, they were like survivalists living, waiting for the end times to come. Totally didn't associate with society, so they were secluded from the whole world. And her brother, where he picked this up, he routinely would call her by this word that we know not to use. It begins with an N, the N word. He called her this routinely. She didn't know what it meant. She'd never heard of it. And so she didn't think a lot about it. But then she escaped there, and she went to school, and she wound up with a PhD at Cambridge, an amazing story. She's at school at Harvard, and she begins to hears in a lecture one day about Martin Luther King. She'd never heard of him. She was like, who is this? Martin Luther King. Oh. She learned about Rosa Parks. She never heard of Rosa Parks. What? Then she learned about Emmett Till. Like, who's Emmett? She'd never heard any of this stuff. And then when she went home, her brother called her by the N word again. She wasn't offended because he didn't intend it any differently from the way he had intended it before, but she said, I'm hearing it now with different ears, and I can't bear to hear that name. Not because it's an insult to me, but because I've learned about these other people. and what that's like. You see, God gives us words. Your dog doesn't have them. You've got them. God gives us words. God gives us words so we can talk to God. And God gives us words so we can bless each other, so we can encourage one another, so we can welcome one another. It's God's great gift. Jesus, after all, was God, the Word, made flesh. Thanks be to God.